Welcome back to our channel. The world stage has seen a whirlwind of activity recently, with significant shifts in global economics and politics impacting nations far and wide. Today, we delve into a story that intertwines iconic American industry, presidential policy, and the bedrock of the nation's heartland, agriculture. We're exploring the complex fallout from John Deere's decision to move production, the subsequent actions taken by former President Trump, and the ripple effects shaking the foundations of the U.S. agricultural sector and even the global auto industry. This narrative involves high-stakes tariffs, farmer sentiment turning sour, plummeting crop prices, and a strategic international chess game playing out before our eyes. It's a multifaceted issue with potentially devastating consequences for small farms, local communities, and America's standing in the global marketplace. We'll break down the key events, analyze the immediate impacts, and explore the long-term implications. What does this mean for the American farmer? Is U.S. agriculture facing an unprecedented collapse? How are international competitors responding? We'll examine these questions and more, culminating in our final conclusions at the end of the video. Before we dive deep, if you find our analysis insightful and want to stay informed on crucial economic and political developments, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting that notification bell. Your support is vital for us to continue bringing you in-depth reports like this one. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe understanding these complex issues matters, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to see our global audience reach. John Deere represents more than just tractors and farm machinery. For nearly 2 centuries, it has stood as an irreplaceable cornerstone of American agriculture. Founded way back in 1837, the company didn't merely manufacture farming equipment. It embodied the resilience, innovation, and forward momentum of rural communities spanning the entire country. Its iconic green and yellow machinery became synonymous with the American farming spirit, a symbol of reliability passed down through generations. John Deere was perceived not just as a corporation, but as a partner to the American farmer, deeply woven into the fabric of the nation's agricultural identity and progress. This long-standing legacy and deep connection made the subsequent developments all the more jarring for those whose livelihoods depend on the land. The narrative took an unexpected and sharp turn earlier this year. John Deere, a stalwart of American manufacturing, delivered a jolt to the nation by announcing the shutdown of multiple manufacturing facilities within the United States. This wasn't merely a consolidation. It involved actively transferring significant production lines south of the border to Mexico. This strategic pivot, shocking to many loyal customers and workers, sent immediate ripples of concern through the agricultural community and the broader economy. The company cited clear objectives behind this major operational shift: the need to substantially reduce operational expenditures, enhance returns for shareholders, and maintain a competitive edge in an increasingly challenging global marketplace. The decision highlighted the intense pressures facing even established American industrial giants in the modern economic landscape, forcing difficult choices between domestic operations and international cost advantages. The immediate consequences, however, were felt most acutely by the American workforce and the communities built around these factories. The ramifications of John Deere's relocation strategy were severe and immediate, particularly for the American workforce. In the first quarter alone following the announcement, over 7,000 workers found their jobs eliminated. These weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They represented families facing uncertainty, skills suddenly made redundant, and decades of loyalty seemingly disregarded. The impact cascaded beyond the factory gates. Towns heavily reliant on Deere's manufacturing plants for their economic vitality spiraled into recession. The ecosystem of local businesses, from diners serving lunch to mechanics repairing equipment, suffered immensely. As the primary economic engine sputtered, these smaller enterprises, dependent on the foot traffic and spending generated by factory workers, were forced to shutter their doors. This wasn't simply about job losses. It was about the unraveling of entire communities, the erosion of local economies, and a profound sense of betrayal among those who had long supported the iconic American brand. The decision to prioritize cost reduction and shareholder value over domestic employment painted a stark picture of the shifting priorities in globalized industry. In the face of this significant industrial shift, and the intense backlash emanating from key agricultural states, regions that had provided substantial electoral support. Former President Donald Trump reacted swiftly and dramatically. Having built a political platform partially on the promise of protecting American jobs and industries, particularly within the manufacturing sector, the John Deere move presented a direct challenge to his America First policy. True to his often combative style, Trump leveraged a speech in Pennsylvania, a state with its own deep manufacturing roots, to send an unequivocal message. The message seemed crystal clear. Companies choosing to move jobs overseas, abandoning American workers and communities, would face punitive measures. This stance resonated with his base and signaled a willingness to use economic policy as a tool to enforce his vision of national interest, even if it meant potentially disrupting established trade relationships and corporate strategies. His response underscored the political sensitivities surrounding manufacturing jobs and the potent symbolism of iconic American brands moving production abroad. The core of Trump's response was a direct threat aimed squarely at John Deere and any other company contemplating similar moves. A staggering 200% tariff on any products manufactured abroad and intended for sale back into the United States market. He explicitly stated he was notifying John Deere immediately. If you proceed with relocating production, this hefty tariff will be applied to everything you attempt to sell into the U.S. This wasn't subtle diplomacy. It was economic hardball, designed to make offshoring prohibitively expensive and force companies to reconsider their manufacturing footprint. The proposed tariff was intended as a powerful deterrent, a clear signal that the administration prioritized keeping manufacturing jobs within American borders, even at the cost of potentially escalating trade tensions or increasing consumer prices. This aggressive stance aimed to fulfill his America First promise and penalize corporations perceived as betraying American workers in favor of foreign labor and lower operating costs. However, this seemingly straightforward punitive measure would soon reveal unintended and complex consequences. But in the complex world of global economics, actions often have unforeseen reactions. Trump's proposed 200% tariff, intended to punish John Deere and protect American jobs, paradoxically created a counterproductive effect that ultimately harmed the very constituents it aimed to help: the American farmers. The price of a standard John Deere tractor, a vital piece of equipment previously costing around $60,000, skyrocketed. Within just a few months, the cost soared to over $100,000. This dramatic increase wasn't solely due to corporate greed. It was a direct consequence of the tariff structure and the realities of global supply chains. Since products imported from Mexico, where production had moved to reduce costs, now constituted nearly 70% of John Deere's new production output, the tariffs effectively inflated the cost of the majority of their components. This price hike placed an enormous burden on American farmers, many of whom were already grappling with significant financial pressures. They were caught in the crossfire, forced to bear the brunt of a policy designed, at least ostensibly, for their benefit. The farming community's reaction extended beyond mere financial strain. It was tinged with a deep sense of betrayal. For generations, American farmers had chosen John Deere, not solely based on product quality, but also driven by loyalty to a brand perceived as intrinsically American-made. This loyalty was built on decades of shared history and a belief in supporting domestic industry. When John Deere effectively abandoned its U.S. manufacturing base, moving production to Mexico, this trust was fractured. The subsequent price hikes, exacerbated by Trump's tariffs on imported components, felt like adding insult to injury. Farmers weren't just facing rising operational costs. They felt let down by a company they had long supported and a policy that seemed to penalize them instead of protecting them. Their response wasn't channeled through loud protests or organized demonstrations in the streets. Instead, it manifested as a quiet but deliberate action, a powerful economic statement reflecting their disillusionment, a widespread boycott of John Deere products. This shift in purchasing behavior signaled a fundamental break in the long-standing relationship between the iconic brand and its core customer base. In crucial farming states like Nebraska, Kansas, and Missouri, the agricultural heartland of America, the farmer boycott gained significant traction. Disillusioned by the perceived abandonment and stung by the subsequent price increases, farmers began actively switching to alternative equipment brands. Competitors like Kubota, AGCO, and Case IH saw an opportunity and benefited from this shift in loyalty. These alternative brands were often perceived as having more farmer-friendly approaches, particularly regarding repair policies. Unlike John Deere, which faced criticism for restrictive software controls that limited independent repairs, these competitors offered greater flexibility and easier accessibility for maintenance. This practical advantage, combined with the emotional impact of the boycott, led to a dramatic downturn in John Deere's market share in these regions. Sales for John Deere dealerships across the Midwest plummeted, dropping by up to a staggering 40%. The iconic green Deere logo, once a ubiquitous symbol of American farming pride visible on nearly every farm, began to vanish, erased from barns, trucks, and farm signs, a visual testament to the boycott's impact. A longtime dealer in Iowa shared the stark reality. We lost more than half of our loyal customers in just 6 months. No one believed this was happening. The shift wasn't just economic, it was cultural, marking a significant change in the agricultural landscape. Please remember to watch this video until the end, where we will summarize the key takeaways and offer our final conclusions on this complex situation. The economic pressures on American farmers extended far beyond the rising cost of tractors. A perfect storm was brewing, combining increased production expenses with a simultaneous and devastating decline in crop prices. As the costs associated with farming, fuel, fertilizer, seeds, and now significantly more expensive equipment, climbed steadily, the prices farmers received for their harvests moved sharply in the opposite direction. Data illustrates this stark trend. From 2022 to mid-2024, corn prices experienced a drop of 37%. Soybeans saw their value decrease by 24%, and wheat wasn't spared either, losing up to 35% of its value during the same period. This squeeze between rising input costs and falling commodity prices created an unsustainable situation for many agricultural producers. The reasons behind this dramatic fall in crop prices were multifaceted, stemming from a confluence of global factors. A significant contributor was global oversupply, where production in various parts of the world outpaced demand, driving prices downward. Compounding this issue were the increasingly evident effects of climate change. Extreme weather events, unpredictable growing seasons, and changing precipitation patterns negatively affected crop yields in numerous regions, adding volatility to the market. Furthermore, international trade dynamics played a crucial role. Reduced export demand, fueled by ongoing trade barriers and geopolitical tensions, limited the markets available for American agricultural products. Former President Trump's tariff policies, while aimed at protecting domestic industries, inadvertently contributed to these trade barriers, creating retaliatory tariffs from other nations and further restricting export opportunities for U.S. farmers. This complex interplay of global supply, climate impacts, and trade policy created a harsh economic environment for American agriculture. With profit margins already razor-thin for many, particularly smaller operations, this sustained decline in crop prices combined with escalating production costs proved to be a fatal blow for a significant segment of the American farming community. Small farms, the traditional backbone of rural America, were especially vulnerable. Lacking the economies of scale and financial reserves of larger agricultural corporations, they struggled to absorb the economic shocks. The grim statistics paint a sobering picture. According to United States Department of Agriculture data, more than 30% of family farms operating on less than 100 acres went bankrupt within just a 3-year period. This alarming rate of failure hadn't been witnessed since the dark days of the Great Depression in the 1930s, highlighting the severity of the crisis engulfing smaller agricultural enterprises across the nation. The dream of independent family farming faced an existential threat. This agricultural crisis is not merely a domestic issue confined within U.S. borders. It signifies a broader erosion of America's global position in agriculture. As production costs continue to rise domestically, the United States finds itself becoming less competitive compared to other major agricultural powerhouses. Nations like Brazil, India, and various European countries are increasingly challenging America's dominance. These competitor nations often benefit from government policies that provide stronger subsidies to their farmers, coupled with initiatives to modernize mechanization and improve efficiency. This government support allows their agricultural sectors to operate with lower overheads and potentially offer more competitive pricing on the global market. Consequently, the U.S. agricultural sector, facing internal cost pressures and navigating complex international trade landscapes, is losing ground, impacting its ability to compete effectively and maintain its long-held status as a leading global food producer. The question looming large is whether the American agricultural sector can recover from this complex web of challenges. The answer appears to depend heavily on three critical factors. Firstly, the federal government's role is paramount. There is a pressing need to increase credit availability and bolster subsidy support specifically targeted at small and medium-sized farms. These measures are essential to prevent these vital operations from being swept into insurmountable debt and ultimately facing bankruptcy, thereby preserving the diversity and resilience of the agricultural landscape. Without substantial government intervention to alleviate the financial pressures, the trend of farm closures is likely to continue, further consolidating the industry into the hands of larger corporations and potentially altering the character of rural America. Secondly, a strategic reinvestment in domestic production and supply chains is crucial for long-term stability and competitiveness. The reliance on foreign imports, particularly for essential inputs and components, has proven to be a vulnerability, as demonstrated by the impact of tariffs and global disruptions. Strengthening domestic manufacturing capabilities, not just for finished equipment, but also for the parts and technologies that underpin the agricultural sector, is essential. This involves fostering innovation, supporting local suppliers, and creating policies that incentivize companies to maintain or return production to American soil. Reducing reliance on foreign imports would not only mitigate risks associated with trade wars and logistical challenges, but also create jobs and bolster national economic security, ensuring a more self-sufficient and resilient agricultural infrastructure for the future. Finally, a significant adjustment of trade policies is necessary to navigate the complexities of the global marketplace effectively. The current landscape, marked by tariffs and retaliatory measures, has demonstrably harmed American agricultural exports and increased costs for domestic producers. Crafting more sustainable bilateral and multilateral agreements is key. These agreements should focus on reducing trade barriers, minimizing the risks associated with tariff wars, and actively working to increase access for American agricultural products in global markets. This requires nuanced diplomacy and a move away from purely protectionist stances towards strategies that balance domestic interests with the realities of international trade. Consumers also hold considerable power in this equation. Their purchasing decisions can significantly influence the market. Choosing goods produced domestically is not just a matter of preference. It represents a vote for supporting American agriculture, local communities, and the national economy. When consumers prioritize American-made products, they send a clear signal to retailers and manufacturers, encouraging investment in domestic production and helping to rebuild the sector's strength from the ground up. Every purchase can contribute to a more resilient and prosperous future for American farming. Let's revisit the parallel situation in the U.S. auto industry, which faced similar pressures and illustrates the broader economic challenges. The industry suffered a staggering loss estimated at up to $219.5 billion in a remarkably short period, largely attributed to trade disputes and retaliatory actions. While former President Trump implemented tariffs aimed at protecting the domestic auto sector, the European Union and China responded with their own harsh retaliatory measures and sanctions. Germany, a leader within the EU, took the significant step of freezing the certification process for U.S. electric vehicles. This action effectively barred popular models like those from Tesla, Ford, and General Motors from being exported to the vast European Union market, which boasts over 440 million consumers. This exclusion represented a severe blow to U.S. car manufacturers, denying them access to a critical international market and directly impacting their potential profits and overall industry growth. The situation became even more complex, with measures taken by France, which imposed a specific carbon tax on vehicles exceeding a certain weight, 1,814 kilograms, and horsepower threshold, 300 horsepower. This targeted tax made larger American vehicles, such as the popular Ford F-Series trucks, Chevrolet Tahoes, and the Hummer EV, effectively unsellable in the French market due to the added cost. These targeted European measures, coupled with broader sanctions, caused significant financial harm to U.S. automakers. More fundamentally, these actions placed American car manufacturers in an increasingly harsh and restrictive global regulatory environment. Competing in major European markets became significantly more challenging, highlighting the vulnerability of the U.S. auto industry to international trade policies and regulatory standards, mirroring the difficulties faced by the agricultural sector. The economic interdependence between the United States and its northern neighbor Canada further complicates the picture. Canada joined forces with the European Union by signing the Green Technology Access Partnership Agreement. While ostensibly focused on promoting environmentally friendly technologies, this agreement implicitly created additional hurdles for American automotive exports to Canada. By aligning standards and potentially favoring EU-based technologies or components, the agreement subtly reduced market opportunities for U.S. cars in this crucial neighboring country. This move not only harms the bottom line of the U.S. auto industry, but also signifies a decrease in the traditional close cooperation between the two North American nations in various economic sectors. The alignment of Canada with the EU on this front underscores a shifting geopolitical landscape where trade partnerships are evolving, potentially leaving U.S. industries facing greater competition and reduced access even within its own continental neighborhood. The cumulative effect of these international pressures, trade disputes, and internal cost increases has created a significant job crisis within the U.S. auto industry, echoing the struggles in agriculture. The worrying reality is stark. Analysis suggested that within just 3 weeks of certain policy implementations, the U.S. auto industry had already lost 200,000 jobs. Workers at car manufacturing plants, skilled technicians, and truck drivers responsible for logistics are all confronting the harsh reality of potential unemployment. This job loss is creating a significant economic crisis, particularly impacting states heavily reliant on the auto industry, such as Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky. These regions, where the auto industry is highly developed and forms the economic bedrock, have been severely impacted by the industry's contraction and associated factory closures. This decline affects not just the direct workers, but ripples through related industries, causing production stoppages and reducing incomes for countless families dependent on the sector's health. Looking ahead, the predictions for the future of the U.S. auto industry paint a concerning picture if current trends persist. The sector is facing the prospect of a strong, sustained decline over the next 3 to 5 years. Industry analysts project that the U.S. auto industry could lose between 5 to 10% of its global market share during this period. This potential loss is contingent on the industry's ability, or failure, to adapt quickly to rapidly evolving international standards and regulations, particularly concerning emissions, electric vehicle technology, and environmental protection measures. While the U.S. struggles to adjust its domestic regulations and manufacturing processes, competitors in Europe and Asia are actively strengthening their positions. These regions are often supported by government initiatives promoting green technology and setting stringent environmental standards, giving their automakers a potential advantage in the global marketplace. If the U.S. fails to keep pace, it risks further isolation and a continued erosion of its market share. In conclusion, the interconnected events surrounding John Deere's production shift, Trump's tariff policies, the subsequent farmer backlash, plummeting crop prices, and the parallel struggles in the U.S. auto industry paint a complex and concerning picture. We've seen how protectionist measures, intended to shield domestic industries, can inadvertently backfire, increasing costs for consumers and producers alike, and even alienating loyal customer bases. The agricultural sector, particularly small family farms, faces immense pressure from rising input costs and falling commodity prices, exacerbated by global oversupply, climate change, and trade barriers. a situation drawing comparisons to the Great Depression. Simultaneously, the U.S. auto industry is grappling with job losses, exclusion from key international markets like the EU due to retaliatory measures and differing standards, and increased competition from nations actively supporting modernization and green technology. Both sectors highlight America's declining competitiveness on the global stage and the vulnerability of domestic industries to international politics and economic shifts. Recovering America's position requires a multi-pronged approach: targeted support for small and medium enterprises, strategic investment in domestic production and resilient supply chains, and carefully calibrated trade policies that foster global access rather than instigating damaging trade wars. The strategic maneuvering by competitors like Japan and the EU underscores the need for the U.S. to adapt to a changing global economic landscape, where technology, sustainability standards, and international alliances are increasingly shaping the future of industry. The path forward remains uncertain, but the challenges facing core American sectors are undeniable. Thank you for joining us for this in-depth analysis. We hope this breakdown provided valuable insights into the critical issues affecting American agriculture and industry. Don't forget to like this video if you found it informative, subscribe for more content like this, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay informed.